Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to Critical Wade Theory, or you might be able to call it Real Talk this time. REEL Talk. That's supposed to be clever. Anyway, I've got a cold today. I, I picked up a cold from somewhere, so you might be able to notice that. My nose is kind of plugged up and whatnot, but I'm going to try to plow through that. And in this episode of this podcast, I'm going to break down one of the relatively newer movies and tell you whether it's worth your time or, well, just deserves a hard pass. So, this movie is only a few years old, so it's not ancient history. It's from 2023 and it's called The Retirement Plan. It's an action comedy starring the one and only Nicolas Cage. So, let's get into it. So, here's the setup. Matt, played by Cage, is a retired assassin just chilling on the Cayman Islands, living a quiet island life. But, surprise, surprise, peace doesn't last long. His estranged daughter, Ashley, played by Ashley Green, shows up out of the blue with her daughter, dragging a whole lot of trouble with her. Turns out they've tangled up with some dangerous criminals. And guess what? Dad's got to step out of retirement and dust off his killer skills to protect them. So that's the basic premise of the movie. It's actually not really much more complicated than that. It's a pretty common element of action movies. They're often not that complicated. I was trying to say complex and complicated at the same time, and it came out complicated. So, anyway, I should tell you that when Matt steps back into action, things get wild. And Nicolas Cage is actually pretty convincing in this movie as sort of a badass, like where, they're typical guns, fists, and some of that classic Cage manic energy. Although it's not as manic as some of his more off the rails type of performances. This is Cage being a little bit more contained in some ways. He doesn't have that many moments where he seems like a crazy person or whatever. He's more like he's cool like a cucumber. Plus, there's Ron Perlman actually in this. He plays a henchman who's honestly one of the more memorable parts of the movie. He might be my favorite character, even though he's a bad guy for sure. The bad guy vibes are led by a ruthless boss or multiple crime boss characters. And of course, Matt's got to take them all down while trying to keep his family safe. And of course, you've got some action scenes and stuff like that, some deaths. He's sort of a badass, so there aren't too many movies that have pacifists who are the action star, right? Um, so anyway, there's also Jackie Earl Haley, who I think I've only ever seen in a few other movies. I know he played Freddy Krueger in the 2010 Nightmare on Elm Street remake that most people hate, but he was also one of the kids who played Bad News Bear, in that old Walter Matthau movie. Jackie Earl Haley played like the one on the motorcycle, like the sort of badass cool kid who joined the team. But here, he's just one of the bad guy characters. And there's also Grace Byers. She plays a woman named Hector. Now, let's talk tone, because this is where things get a little bit shaky. The retirement plan mixes humor, action, and family drama. Sometimes it clicks, but other times not so much. One minute Cage is cracking jokes, and the next he's in full on assassin mode. But I gotta say, I don't remember any of the jokes, but I think he made some here and there. There is some humor in the movie, but I don't really remember that much of it. It's a bit of a tonal roller coaster, so some audiences they might not really care for it that much. It all depends on your personal tastes. So that's why I said, it's a bit shaky for some viewers. They might not really think the movie delivers in certain respects. I thought it was fine personally, but I'm just saying it's going to be a mixed bag that gets mixed responses from audiences and critics. So some people love the quirky vibe, and others think it's kind of all over the place. And I'm sure, as any action movie or any horror movie will receive the critique that, it doesn't really bring that much new to the table. But what I will say, I think this movie, even though it's not particularly original or thought provoking, it's pretty good for what it is. It might even be worth a rewatch, at least in my opinion. It's like they couldn't decide if they wanted John Wick or Meet the Parents, and you know, I think that's all right. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's not that many like Meet the Parents kind of moments, but there are a few little family dynamics that pop up. It's not quite as comedic as it could have been. Um, you know, but it's hard to balance those elements. And while Cage's performance is always potentially entertaining, even if you don't like him, I mean, come on, it's Nicolas Cage we're talking about. Even the haters seem to enjoy his over the top moments. Like, it's bees, I got a head full of bees. That classic moment from the remake of The Wicker Man. Well, I didn't say he's got a head full of bees, but you know what I mean. He often plays characters who seem like they might have a head full of bees. The plot itself is pretty predictable. I'm not going to pretend that you're going to find a great deal of innovation here. You've seen this old assassin pulled back into action thing before, and it's not exactly reinventing the genre. But it's well done. Like I said, that alone might be a good reason to check it out. And maybe you'll disagree. I obviously can't say for sure. Maybe you'll fall in love with this movie and think it's the greatest thing ever. I don't know. It all depends on your personal tastes. I do want to give a quick shout out to Tim Brown, who directed this one. He also did Buckley's Chance in 2021, which I know practically nothing about. But this is a very different beast. And I do appreciate the direction in this movie because, like I said, it's well done and it's one of the things that stands out. Everything goes about as well as you could expect this type of movie to go. There's there's no real significant critiques that I could conjure up, even if I'm looking for them. So, what's the verdict then? The ultimate verdict? If you're a Nicolas Cage fan, I think you'll think this movie is a fun ride. There's action, there's humor. Again, a little bit of humor here and there. And there's Cage doing what he does best. Like I said, Ron Perlman's performance is actually pretty good. He, oddly enough, almost makes a character sympathetic in a way, even though the character is plainly a villain. And he makes it clear that he would be willing to kill a kid. So if you're able to be that kind of character, yet still be able to, I don't know, seem real and seem a little bit sympathetic, that takes a little bit of, I guess, talent. And part of that might be the writing too, how it was written. If you're looking for something fresh or groundbreaking, you might walk away thinking, that this movie's lame or something. But if you just want to watch an action movie that happens to star Nicolas Cage and the aforementioned actors, well, you're in luck. This is going to work out for you. So that's all for today. I could go on and on, but I think I've said enough. Thanks for turning in or tuning turning in tuning in to the critical weight theory. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell me what you thought about the retirement plan, or other movies you might want me to check out, or TV shows, or you can mention my other episodes. If you want me to tackle a social topic or a political topic, you can go ahead and throw that in my direction as well. So until next time, stay safe and stay entertained and yada yada yada. I've said enough.